When the first alert flashed across the Ukrainian operations screen, no one in the underground bunker understood what they were truly about to witness. The grainy satellite feed showed a Russian military supply train rolling through the Bryansk sector, its cars covered, its escort units thick. But there was something different this time. This train wasn't moving ammunition or rations. According to intercepted comms, it was carrying components for a new electronic warfare system, one designed to cripple long-range Ukrainian drones. If the train reached the Belgorod transfer yard, Kyiv knew the skies would change forever. They had one chance to stop it, and that chance was already slipping away. In the dim blue glow of the bunker, a Ukrainian drone commander named Arsen leaned forward, his fingers tapping nervously on the desk. For months, his unit had been developing a swarm tactic, a coordinated strike using several drones acting like a pack of wolves hunting a single target. But no one expected the first real test to be against something this important. The train was heavily protected, shielded by mobile jammers and a layered air defense bubble. A mistake could mean losing the entire swarm without even scratching the target. But waiting meant letting the Russians deliver the system that would blind Ukraine's drones for months. There was no time for hesitation. Arsen gave a silent nod, and the room snapped into motion. Technicians brought the swarm online, 9 drones, each small, fast, and equipped with a specialized payload designed to punch through armored rail cars. They hummed over the Ukrainian border in complete radio silence, gliding low, hugging every hill and tree line to remain invisible to Russian radar. The tension inside the bunker was suffocating. Everyone watched the live telemetry as tiny green icons crawled toward the border. At that moment, the Ukrainians weren't just flying machines, they were threading a needle through the most dangerous patch of airspace in Europe. A cold wind swept across a remote field as the drones skimmed above a river, their propellers whispering like insects in the dark. The Russian EU units along the railway had no idea that anything was coming. The jammers were calibrated for larger aircraft, not palm-sized machines hugging the terrain like shadows. The train itself continued lumbering forward, its diesel engine echoing across the forest. Inside the armored car carrying the electronic warfare modules, Russian technicians sat relaxed, sipping tea. They believed the night belonged to them. Inside the Ukrainian bunker, the drone operators began to whisper updates. Distance to target, 10 kilometers. Air defense activity, 0. Electronic interference, low. Everything was perfect, too perfect. Arsen felt it in his gut. The Russians weren't incompetent. They were hiding something. And his fear became reality when one of the operators shouted that the drones were entering a jamming field, massive, powerful, and growing stronger every second. The feed on 3 drones instantly distorted, flickering into static. A 4th lost altitude, tumbling dangerously close to the treetops before stabilizing. Panic rippled through the room. If the jamming intensity increased just a fraction more, the entire swarm would be blind. Arsen clenched his jaw, refusing to let months of planning die without a fight. He ordered a maneuver they hadn't tested at full scale, a split pattern. The swarm divided into 3 groups, each taking a different approach corridor. The hope was simple: the Russians couldn't blanket all directions at once. The move worked. As the drones shifted, the jamming weakened. The Russians had oriented their EU emitters forward, expecting a direct attack. They never imagined Ukrainian drones would use the forested ravines and dried riverbeds as aerial tunnels. With the interference dropping, the swarm regained clarity. The train was now only minutes away. Then something unexpected happened. A new Russian escort vehicle, a BTR with a short-range air defense turret, rolled out from the tree line and took up position alongside the train. Its radar swept the sky, looking for large UAVs. It saw nothing. The operator inside reported all clear. But as he leaned back in his seat, he didn't realize that 9 small drones were already racing through the forest canopy just 40 meters above his head. Arsen's voice cut through the tension, visual in 10 seconds. Prepare for attack run. The drones climbed in a synchronized arc, breaking through the tree line and catching their first direct view of the train. The operators gasped. The armored EU container was in the center of the convoy, flanked by fuel cars, troop transports, and a flatbed carrying armored vehicles. A single strike in the wrong place could trigger a catastrophic explosion that would take half the forest with it. Arsen needed precision, absolute precision. The lead drone accelerated, lining up with the armored car. Its camera feed shook violently from turbulence, but the targeting software held steady. The moment the drone committed to its dive, Russian alarms finally screamed to life. The BTR's turret spun, firing in all directions. Tracers cut across the night like burning threads. One Ukrainian drone was hit, bursting into a ball of sparks. Another barely dodged a projectile that whizzed past its left propeller. But the swarm didn't stop. The remaining 8 drones dove together. The Russians fired wildly, unable to track multiple small targets at once. The lead drone slammed into the armored car with a thunderous blast, erupting in a sphere of fire. The shockwave rippled across the train, knocking soldiers off their feet. Before they could recover, the second drone struck the same car, then the third, each impact ripping the container apart panel by panel. Inside the bunker, the Ukrainians watched as the center of the train became engulfed in flames. The Russians tried to decouple the damaged cars, but the intense heat made the coupling mechanisms seize. The fire spread rapidly, racing along the train's length. Fuel cars ignited in a towering explosion that lit up the sky like a sunrise. The shockwave shook houses kilometers away. But something strange happened next, something no one expected. As the fire reached the flatbed carrying armored vehicles, a secondary detonation erupted from beneath the tarps. Analysts later realized the Russians were secretly transporting loitering munitions, the very same type they used to strike Ukrainian cities. The explosion was so violent that several armored vehicles were thrown off the tracks entirely. One landed upside down in a ditch. Another cartwheeled like a toy being tossed by a giant. The Russian soldiers who survived the first blasts began fleeing into the forest, abandoning the burning convoy. Some fired their rifles helplessly into the air, desperately searching for drones that were already gone or destroyed. But the swarm still had one final surprise. The last drone in the formation, Drone 9, had been held in reserve. It loitered above the forest canopy, waiting for Arsen's final command. When he saw a group of Russian technicians trying to salvage equipment from the wreckage, Arsen made the call. The drone descended silently, gliding between plumes of black smoke, then detonated above the remaining cargo. The explosion collapsed the last standing rail cars and ensured nothing on that train would ever operate again. Back in the bunker, the operators erupted in celebration. Months of engineering, planning, and risk had led to one of the most successful behind-the-lines strikes of the war. But Arsen didn't celebrate. He simply exhaled, a long, tired breath, knowing the Russians would respond. And respond hard. Within hours, Russian command launched drones and fighter jets along the border, searching for Ukrainian launch sites. Their media outlets scrambled to control the narrative, claiming the train had derailed by accident. But satellite footage told the truth. A precision, multi-drone strike had cut deep into Russian logistics, destroying a system that could have shifted the air war balance. The next morning, analysts discovered something even more shocking. The EU modules destroyed in the strike weren't prototypes, they were part of a new jamming architecture Russia intended to deploy across the entire Belgorod region. Had they arrived on schedule, Ukraine's long-range drones would have been significantly weakened for months. Instead, the strike crippled the rollout before it even began. But the story didn't end there. 3 days later, Russian units returned to salvage what was left of the train. As they sifted through twisted metal, they found fragments of Ukrainian drones unlike anything they had encountered before: new circuitry, modified components, advanced navigation modules. The discovery rattled Moscow. It proved Ukraine was quietly developing drone technology faster than Russian analysts predicted. This forced Russia to accelerate its own counter-drone research, triggering a new phase of the electronic warfare race, one that neither side could afford to lose. For Ukraine, the strike was more than a tactical win. It sent a message across the border. They could strike deep, precise, and unpredictable. And no matter how heavily Russia armored its trains, depots, or convoys, the skies were no longer theirs. The wreckage of the train burned for nearly 12 hours. The smoke could be seen from villages miles away. Locals later reported hearing small buzzing noises before the explosions, an eerie reminder of how silent, how invisible, and how devastating modern warfare had become. In Kyiv, Arsen finally left the bunker after a sleepless night. As he stepped outside, the cold air hit his face. The city was quiet, but for the first time in weeks, he felt something unusual, not relief, but resolve. The war was far from over. New threats were coming. New battles would be fought. But on that night, against all odds, a swarm of 9 small drones changed the course of a much larger fight. And somewhere, across the border, Russia was still trying to understand how something so small could destroy something so important.